Dear learners, we shall be continuing our discussion on the various kinds of business organizations. In this part 9 lecture, we shall be focusing on three varied kinds of business organizations: enterprise, cooperative or cooperative societies, and special purpose vehicle. Now, we have already undertaken a glance or a bird's eye view of an enterprise, cooperative, and special purpose vehicle in the initial lecture on the kinds of business organization. But in this particular lecture, we shall be going in depth on their structure, legal framework, and their functions. And we shall also be distinguishing their features with some other business organizations. So, beginning first with an enterprise. Now, in simple words, an enterprise is a business or an organization that is engaged in economic activities such as selling or goods or services. It can be small or large and may be run by individuals, groups, or corporations. Enterprises generally aim to earn profits, grow, and contribute to the economy. So it is like an umbrella term which can be used for various kinds of business organizations whose structure and form may differ. So enterprise is a general expression. But in the context of our discussion here, the enterprise is legally defined under Section 2E of the MSMED Act 2006. So this MSMED law is relatively of recent origin as compared to some other legislations on business law like sale of goods law, partnership law, so on and so forth. Now, according to this provision, an enterprise means an industrial undertaking or a business concern or any other establishment, by whatever name called, engaged in the manufacture or production of goods in any manner pertaining to any industry specified in the first schedule to the Industries Development and Regulation Act 1951, or engaged in providing or rendering of any service or services. So this is, as you would acknowledge, a very technically worded definition, but to simplify it, it includes an industry, business, or other establishment which is engaged in manufacture or production of goods or provision of services. So the ambit of an enterprise is generally very vast and wide. Now, moving on to classification of an enterprise can be classified into three heads as per the MSMED Act 2006. It can be a micro, small, or a medium enterprise. A micro enterprise is an enterprise where investment in the business of plant or machinery or equipment is capped at 2.5 crore and annual turnover does not exceed 10 crore rupees. A small enterprise is an enterprise where the investment in plant and machinery or equipment does not exceed 25 crore rupees and the turnover does not exceed 100 crore rupees. Thirdly, a medium enterprise is a business organization where the investment in business or plant machinery or equipment it is limited to 125 crore rupees and turnover does not exceed 500 crore rupees. The budget of 2025 revised the MSME classification. This revised classification is effective 1st April 2025. This allows more businesses to qualify as MSMEs. So as I suggested, that enterprise is generally an umbrella or a collective or a general expression that is used for various kinds of businesses. So the classification is not according to the form or structure, but what kind of an enterprise is there depends upon how much of investment in the business is there. So according to that, it may be classified as micro, small, or medium, whatever may be the case. So in that sense, an enterprise can include a variety and a host of different business organizations, like individuals as proprietors or startups, business owners. It can be private and public companies. It could be sole proprietors. It could be a partnership firm or a limited liability partnership. It could be certain self-help groups, cooperative societies, and even trusts. Now we will compare some of the features of an enterprise with a very popular business organization, that of a company. So to begin with, under the company law, the scope of the law is restricted to companies, but the enterprise law, it could extend to various other kinds of business organizations like company, partnership, limited liability partnership, as we explained. So the scope is very broad and the scope of a company is narrow. The scope of some other business organizations like partnership or limited liability partnership is also very narrow because they are confined only to those business organizations. The formation of a company is again under the Companies Act, whereas of an enterprise, it depends upon what kind of business organization is there, and depending upon the kind of a business organization, the registration requirement varies accordingly. But the registration of an enterprise as such is not compulsory, but if it is required, it can be done on the Government of India Udyam portal. The legal framework of company law, as we know, is under the Companies Act 2013. But if an enterprise is registered according to the quantum of investment, whether it is micro, small or medium, it has to be registered under the MSMED Act 2006. So the classification of a company is very vertical, depending upon the kind of a company, which shall be dealing with later in a separate lectures on the kinds of companies. But in case of an enterprise, it is horizontal. So the enterprise is based upon the size, investment and turnover. The governance of a company is according to the memorandum and the articles, whereas of an enterprise, it may vary according to the what kind of an enterprise or business organization is there. So we have here to introduce enterprise as a kind of a business organization. We've had a limited discussion here. A detailed discussion we've had, especially of the MSMED Act 2006, in a separate module altogether. You can refer to that for a detailed discussion on the legal framework of the enterprise law. Now moving on to the next business organization, that is a cooperative society. So in simple terms, a cooperative society is a kind of a voluntary association of individuals who come together to achieve a common economic interest, promoting their members' economic well-being through cooperative principle, which is the basis of a cooperative society. The main objective of a cooperative society or a cooperative, whatever you choose to call it, is to provide support to the members of the society or to a community of members. So people come forward individually and form a group. They pool their individual resources, they utilize them in the best possible manner and derive some common benefit out of it. So the key principle here is the principle of cooperation and the principle of mutuality. So essentially speaking, the objective of a cooperative society is to bring small individuals who do some economic activity to a common platform as a cooperative society, which then performs a large business function as an organization. The legal framework of the cooperative society is under the Cooperative Societies Act 1912, or we also have various state legislations which regulate the governance of the cooperative societies. Recently, as you know, there is a Ministry of Cooperation which has been established in the Government of India, which also kind of oversees or regulates the functioning of cooperatives. Now moving on to the cooperative principle, which is the modus operandi of functioning of the cooperatives. So the cooperative principles can be broken down into some elements. So we have the voluntary and open membership, where the cooperatives as voluntary organizations, they are open to all people who are able to devote their services and willing to accept the responsibilities of the membership of the society. The next is democratic management, and the cooperatives, they are managed on democratic lines. The society is managed by a group known as the board of directors. The members of the board of directors are the elected representatives of the society. So each member has a single vote, irrespective of the number of shares held. For example, in a village credit society, the small farmer having one share has equal voting right as that of a landlord having 20 shares. So in this one man, one vote, which is different from that of a company, for example. So in a company, if your voting power in the meetings of the company depends upon how many shares an individual shareholder holds. More the number of shares, more voting power. But that is not the case with a cooperative society. The sine qua non or the rationale of a cooperative society is the service. So cooperatives are not formed with the only objective of maximization of profits in other business organizations. The main purpose of a cooperative society is to provide service to its members, and profit can be a part of it. So, for example, in a consumer cooperative society, the goods are sold to its members at a reasonable price by retaining a small margin of profit. It also provides a better quality of goods to its members and the general public. Then self-help through mutual cooperation. The cooperative societies thrive on this principle. So generally catering to weaker sections of the society, financially weaker sections of the society, cooperatives, they convert the weakness of members into strength by adopting the principle of self-help through mutual cooperation, the power of many. So as the old English saying goes, united we stand and divided we fall. So there is the power of the collective. So it works on the principle of each for all and all for each. Now the structure of a cooperative society resembles to a cooperative structure, and the element of limited liability is there, which, as we have discussed, acts to the benefit and advantage to the members of a cooperative society. So cooperative society is, although as a business organization it has certain common elements, but there are diversification and variations into the different kinds of cooperatives which could be there. So beginning with, we have a consumer cooperative society which are formed to protect the interests of general consumers by making consumer goods available at reasonable price. There, the members of the cooperative, they buy goods directly from the producers or manufacturers and thereby eliminate the middlemen or intermediaries in the process of distribution. So Kendriya Bhandars, as you must have heard of, Apna Bazaar and Sehkari Bhandar are examples of consumers cooperative society. Then we have producers cooperative societies which are formed to protect the interests of small producers by making available items of their need for production like raw materials, tools, equipments, machinery, etc. Handloom societies like APCO, Boyanika, Haryana Handloom, etc. are examples of producers cooperative society. Then we have cooperative societies in marketing, which are formed by small producers and manufacturers who find it difficult to sell their products individually. The society collects the products from the individual members and takes the responsibility of selling those products in the market. Gujarat Cooperative Milk Marketing Federation, that sells Amul milk products, is an example of marketing cooperative society. Then we have Cooperative Credit Society, which are formed to provide financial support to the members. The society accepts deposits from members and grants them loans at reasonable rates of interest in the times of need. Village Service Cooperative Society and Urban Cooperative Banks are examples of Cooperative Credit Society. Then we have Cooperative Farming Society, which are formed by small farmers to work jointly and thereby enjoy the benefits of large-scale farming. Lift irrigation cooperative societies and Pani Panchayats are some of the examples of cooperative farming society. Then again, a very common kind of cooperative society is housing, which are formed to provide residential houses to their members. They purchase land, develop it, construct houses or flats, and allot the same to its members. Some societies are also provided loans at low rate of interest to their members to construct their own houses. The Employees Housing Societies and Metropolitan Housing Cooperative Society are examples of housing cooperative society. So the various kinds of cooperatives are sector specific and they cater to the sector to which they are engaged in, depending upon consumer, producers, marketing, credit, farming, housing, whatever may be the case. Now there are some comparisons, similarities, dissimilarities which are there in a cooperative with some other business organizations. Here we will be discussing it in the context of a company. So as we know that the company is formed under the Companies Act, whereas a cooperative is formed under the Cooperative Societies Act. The legal framework again depends upon the legislation for a company under the Companies Act and a Cooperative Societies Act for a cooperative. The governance of a company, as we know, memorandum and the articles, but of a cooperative society, there are separate bylaws which govern them. So like memorandum and articles are like bylaws of a company, but cooperative, they have their own bylaws. So the principal and the most important consideration for establishing and running a company is profit, if it is for profit, although there are also companies not for profit. But in a cooperative society, although the element of profit is there, but it is not the only objective. The objective is to benefit individual members who are small economic actors. Then the finance of company as a business organization is through shareholders, but that of a cooperative society is through contribution of individual members. So like members of a company are known as shareholders, but of a cooperative society they are just known by the name of members. So liability in a company, depending upon its incorporation, may be limited or unlimited, but that of a cooperative society, because it essentially caters to weaker sections of the society, there is limited liability. The number of members in a company again may vary widely depending upon a type of a company, and that of a cooperative is 10 to any number. Now the legal personality of a company again is very similar to that of a cooperative. It has separate legal personality. Same is for cooperative, separate from its members. Just like the property is owned by a company, similarly the property of a cooperative society is owned by a cooperative. The perpetual succession again is common for a company and a cooperative dealing from its respective members. Now the transfer of shares or transfer of investment in a company, it is freely transferable except for one kind of a company, that is a private company. But in case of a cooperative there are restrictions whether you can transfer your membership. Now the management and ownership divide is obviously there in a company, different set of owners, different set of managers. But in a cooperative there is convergence because many of the board of directors, they are members of the cooperative. Same may not be true for a company. So the board of directors may not be shareholders, and shareholders need not be the board of directors. So the voting power in a company is different from that of a cooperative. How much voting rights you have depends upon the number of shares and not how many number of shareholders are there. So if there is one shareholder who owns 50% of the share capital, then he has half the voting power in the company. But in a cooperative, it is more democratic. So one member, one vote, irrespective of the number of contribution or shares he has in the cooperative society. Then the next business organization we are going to take up is special purpose vehicle. It is a very modern concept, and there is no specific legal framework governing an SPV or a special purpose vehicle, but it depends upon the context in which this term is used. Now, the RBI guidelines on securitization of standard assets 2006, they define an SPV to mean SPV means any company, trust, or other entity constituted or established for a specific purpose, the activities of which are limited to those for accomplishing the purpose of the company, trust, or other entity, as the case may be. The SPV is structured in a manner which is intended to isolate the corporation, trust, or entity, as the case may be, from the credit risk of an originator to make it bankruptcy remote. Now, as you would acknowledge, this is a very long and technically worded definition. Now, to simplify it, a special purpose vehicle is a separate legal entity which is created by a parent organization for a specific business purpose or activity, often to serve the purposes of the parent organization. So, it does not have independent existence outside of a parent organization. So, it is like sourced from another parent organization and for a specific objective for which the parent organization needs it. Now, SPVs again is a very general expression in the context of various business organizations. So, it can take various legal forms, including limited liability partnerships, limited liability companies, trusts, corporations, depending upon the specific needs and jurisdictions. Now, a key function of an SPV is to isolate financial risks of the parent organization by transferring the risks or financial difficulties of the parent organization to an SPV. Then it won't necessarily affect the parent organization. So, SPVs can be put to multiple uses depending upon the objective for which they have been formed. For example, the uses for which they can be put to are to isolate the assets from the parent company. So this can protect the assets from the parent company's creditors or from liability in the event of a lawsuit. SPVs can also be used to manage risks. For example, an industrial company may create an SPV to hold all of its hazardous waste. This would help to protect the company from the liability of any accidents or environmental damage. The SPVs can be used to achieve tax efficiency. For example, a company may create an SPV to invest in foreign markets. This can help to reduce the company's tax liability. SPVs can be structured to meet the specific needs of the transaction or the parent organization. This makes them a very flexible financial instrument. Now, this is the most modern kind of a business organization to cater to the various complexities of business transactions through various layers of companies. And the most important thing in a special purpose vehicle is that, as the name suggests, it is a special kind of an organization with a limited objective, which is to serve the objects of a parent organization. So, in itself, it does not have any specific objects of itself except to serve the objects of a parent organization. Now, we will briefly compare an SPV with that of a company. So, a company, as we know, is the scope of the word company is restricted to companies as incorporated under the Companies Act, whereas an SPV, like that of an enterprise, it may include various kinds of business organizations, as I've explained, maybe partnership, LLP, so on and so forth. The formation of a company is under the Companies Act, but SPV depends upon the kind of a business organization that is created. Now, the objectives of company can be multiple and can be broad depending upon the memorandum and the articles. But SPV, as we know, it is a kind of a short gap arrangement or a short-term project or a specific project or activity which is related to some main object of parent organization. Company is a parent or an independent unit in itself, whereas an SPV is a subsidiary or linked to a parent company. The main function of company is to conduct business. If it is for business, it can also be for charitable objects. Whereas the main objective of an SPV is not to carry on business to the same extent or volume as being done for a parent organization, but to facilitate certain operations of the parent organization, like managing of risk. Now, company, we have all kinds of companies. We can't live without companies. We can't imagine a world without companies. They are omnipresent, they are in all sectors. But generally, SPVs are for specific objects and in specific areas like real estate. To summarize this lecture, we have discussed the legal framework governing an enterprise, the horizontal classification of enterprises as micro, small, medium enterprises, generic expression which can be used for various kinds of business organizations. Then we talked about cooperatives, the legal framework, what objectives do the cooperatives fulfill, and the various kinds of cooperatives and some of its differences with other business organizations. And lastly, we talked about special purpose vehicles, what objects do they serve, how you can differentiate them with other business organizations, especially in the context of a company. So to give a summary of the business organizations where we have discussed so far, there are numerous kinds of business organizations that we have discussed, which are both relatable and differentiable from a company based on their concept, structures, principles, and the law. Now, to just give you a summary, we have discussed company. Now, various kinds of companies are there, but company as a business organization, we have undertaken a discussion in multiple lectures. For various kinds of companies, because all kind of company are also different kinds of business organizations, and there are different reasons, objectives and rationales, utilities why different kinds of companies may be created by entrepreneurs. So for this we have a separate series of lectures on the kinds of companies. But company in a generic sense, we have discussed this. Then corporation, again extension of a company. Now I have devoted the maximum amount of time to a company because this is, I consider it as the most important business organization, and business law would not be complete without having an extensive discussion on the company. And some of the core characteristics or features of a company which are there, like whether the liability is limited, whether personality is there, whether management is there, raising of finances, they are common to all different kinds of business organizations. Then we discussed about sole proprietorship, partnership, limited liability partnership, Hindu undivided family. Now just to take a pause, that on partnership and limited liability partnership, again as I have said, we have separate modules on partnership and limited liability partnership where we will be undertaking a detailed discussion on the legal framework. For sole proprietorship, there is not much to discuss. It is a very simple organization. Not much legal framework is there. For Hindu undivided family, we've also discussed the Hindu Succession Act, Hindu law, what is form and structure. Then enterprise law, we have a separate module for it. Then a cooperative society, the business aspects, the legal aspects of a cooperative society we have already covered. And then lastly, special purpose vehicle. So this is a summary of the various kinds of business organizations there. Now obviously the kinds of business organizations, they could also be extended to various kinds of company. Because there are 28 different kinds of companies, so I haven't discussed it under this head. There is a different head of kinds of companies where we have taken it up. So they are also kinds of business organizations. So you can refer to that for the various kinds of companies. With this, we end this lecture. Thank you.